Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning into PVD Horror. This is Dave, and today I'm going to give you two quick film reviews. Our first film being Dirty Boy, and the second film being The Man in the White Van. So, we're going to get things started talking about a film named Dirty Boy. This had its theatrical run back in September, both in the US and the UK, but is hitting digital platforms as of October 15th. It also had a run at Raindance Film Festival. It was nominated for some awards there. And it marks the writer and producer Doug Rayo's feature length directorial debut. The cast includes Graham McTavish, who some might recognize from The Witcher, Stan Steinbicker. I said that wrong, I'm pretty sure. And Susie Porter, and a few other notable characters. And the plot line reads this: raised in an oppressive cult, a reclusive schizophrenic discovers that he's being framed by the cult leaders for a series of ritualistic murders and must prove his innocence by saving their next victim and destroying the evil sect from within. All right, that's quite the setup there. So there's some things I really want to point out about this film. First off, I will say, I guess I'll just get right to it. This is a film I enjoyed. I can honestly say this was a film that kind of took me by surprise. I liked the trailer, but I wasn't really sure how the film was going to play out. And even in up like starting the film, the first scene, I was like, oh, all right, I don't, this is really in your face with the themes of mental health, which, for me is fine. I like themes of mental health, but sometimes when it's too in your face, it can be a little bit like, all right, that might be too much. But this one hit a lot of notes of things that I like. So let me just kind of get into those. There's obviously, like I said, the mental health aspect, but they also go into cults. And it's in this weird futuristic, but then looks very old fashioned time frame, which I really enjoyed. I thought it was kind of unique. I will say in general, Dirty Boy is unlike any film I've really watched this year. I really can't compare it to anything, although there's some pretty heavy influences to things that I already enjoy. So our main character, Isaac, he appears to be suffering from something like dissociative identity disorder, or as they said in the plot summary, schizophrenia. But ultimately, right off the bat, we see that there's another version of him or another personality that he has, and that's named Frankie. And it's a little bit of a more brazen, more vulgar version of himself. And he kind of eggs him on. And Isaac is more quiet natured, isolated, I guess you would say. But he's in this religious commune, which looks like a mix of like Warren Jeff's cult and like Gilead from The Handmaid's Tale. And they're all very aware of Isaac's mental illness, and they often shame him about it. And then there's constantly this like reprimand about him being dirty, which hence the name Dirty Boy. So it's kind of like this way that they shame him for being quote unquote dirty. He spends much of the time, like in the film, searching for his own history, not really knowing his past or his parents and things like that. But he has like these memories that keep kind of flooding, and he's not really sure how to make sense of them. So he's constantly like trying to make sense of these visions, as well as just like opposing authority throughout, and kind of like trying to sneak around and find details and also discover the true nature of the cult, because he really doesn't even understand why he's there or who these people are, nor does he trust anybody. Um, so he's overly curious and suspicious, and that obviously causes him to find himself in various conflicts. And overall, the community just kind of views him as a problem, which just keeps kind of pushing him out and out and out. Um, yeah, so that's kind of like how things played on. I won't get into spoiler territory, but like I said, I kind of like the way the film is set in like this period of time where the first thing I noticed was like it looks very like pristine. It's a beautiful setting. It reminded me of some films that like maybe something that's set out in Sweden, or something like that. There's just something about it. And then they're wearing like these kind of like old timey or old fashioned clothes, like the white button down collared shirts tucked into these slacks and things like that. um yeah, it's just it's interesting, like but then it's set in the future because, and we only know that because there's these devices that kind of like have these 3D holographic things, and you can kind of see videos in those holographics. So you know that like obviously this is technology we don't have yet. So I like the setting. It reminded me of some films that it kind of escaping me right now, but that part I really liked. I like the themes of mental illness. So like I said, the first scene, I was like, oh man, here we go. It was like very obvious what was going on. But as we go on, you start to question a little bit, like what is really going on with him? Is it schizophrenia? Does he have different personalities? Or is this kind of a manifestation of something else that's going on? And I like that. I liked how they kind of explore it, but I also like how they challenge the idea of mental illness. How long have you suffered with mental illness? And he's not necessarily suffering, right? It's for him, it's kind of a way of survival, or a way of kind of opposing things. So it that aspect, I liked how they played with these ideas. So it was really interesting to me. But ultimately it does kind of also point out like who really is the person with the illness. Is it this character Isaac, who is just trying to survive and understand things, or is it these individuals running this cult who are controlling things and setting these double standards and locking people away and all the other stuff that kind of goes on here. Um and also this idea of what shame can do to a person, and I've touched on that recently in episodes and interviews with some filmmakers. But I like the idea of, again, they're bringing up this idea of like shaming people and how that you internalize that, and like the idea of being a dirty boy, like, and what that can kind of do to your self-image, and things like that. Some aspects that I was kind of like, oh, I thought maybe they could have done differently is, at times the film almost appears too much like Fight Club. And that piece of it, I was like, all right, it just towed the line too heavily on that. And then there's, like I said, there's sometimes almost feels too much of an influence of like Handmaid's Tale or something like that, which are just two very familiar entities. And for a film that's as unique as this, I kind of feel like it didn't need to lean so heavily on those influences, and could have just stood on it better on its own without that. But with that being said, overall, I enjoyed this. It was entertaining. It was one that I was definitely glad at the end that I was like, oh, I'm glad I was able to check that out. It was a film that, was not something that I had really heard much about, so I didn't know what to expect. And I was pleased. I was surprisingly pleased. So definitely give this a watch when you get a chance, especially now that it's going to be on VOD. You can watch it from home. I think that will be a nice option for this film. But if you had the chance to watch it in theaters, that's great. But I don't think we will at this point. So Dirty Boy, October 15th, should be out on VOD in the US and the UK, I believe. So I would definitely say give this a watch, especially if you're looking for something unique. If you like cults, if you like films about mental health, or bringing awareness to mental health, or challenging our perceptions of mental health, this is a good film for all that. So definitely, keep this on your radar. All right, for my second film, we have The Man in the White Van, which is already out now on DVD, Blu-ray, digital in the US and the UK. And the plot summary for this one reads, delving into eerie underbelly of a seemingly idyllic 1974 Florida town, this creepy suspense thriller follows the harrowing experience of young Annie Williams, a spirited girl whose carefree existence is turned upside down as she becomes stalked by an ominous man in a white van. Knowing her wild imagination, her parents dismiss her fears, plunging Annie into a terrifying Halloween nightmare that shatters her world. This is a tension-packed thrill ride inspired by a series of true crimes that shook the southern states of America. This is the extraordinary true tale of one girl's unimaginable ordeal with a serial killer. The cast for this includes Madison Wolfe, who people might recognize from The Conjuring 2, Ali Larter from The Final Destination or Legally Blonde, and Sean Astin of The Goonies and The Stranger Things and The Lord of the Rings. So some great familiar faces in this one. That is Probably where my excitement about this film ends. And I'm going to do my best because there's things to appreciate about this film, I'm sure. And I read some reviews from other people who definitely seem to enjoy this film a lot more than I did. With that being said, I am going to give you my honest review, but as always, I always encourage people check it out on your own so you can make your own opinion, your own formulation of the film, and that can lead to a discussion. I think that's the whole point of doing reviews is not to tell you not to watch it, but to present my thoughts so that I can hear other people's thoughts and we can have a discussion because that's what film is ultimately all about. Um, so for me, The Man in the White Van felt like a straight to video neuter down horror film. And yeah, that was unfortunate. I was kind of looking forward to this film. I didn't know a ton about it, but I had seen a few previews and I was like, all right, that seems like there could be some potential there. And I still think there is potential with this film. I just don't think they tapped into that potential. And unfortunately, what results from that is a film that kind of felt empty and like really void of anything that thrilled me. Um, I struggled a lot with the characters at times. Like, it felt like I was watching like a Christian film, and no shade to Christian films. It just, for me, it didn't feel like what I was told I was supposed to be watching. I was waiting for like Kirk Cameron to come out and make an appearance and there to be some kind of moral lesson, which I guess there might have been actually. And I just didn't really buy the authenticity of the family dynamic. It just felt very much like I'm watching a family sitcom or something like that. And I really like Sean Astin, and I like Ali Larter, and but just they all just felt very much like cardboard cutout characters, and they lacked depth. And the other part of this film, was I just think they focused on the wrong aspects. I mean, it was like so much about this family, and I wanted to see more of the Man in the White Van. And like when you saw him, it was like, he was there, but then he wasn't there. And then we're, following this girl to school or to a party and at family dinner and stuff like that. And I just didn't care about that stuff. No, it just wasn't what I wanted to see. I wanted to see a thriller. I wanted to see, you know, a man in a white van haunting and he was, but it just wasn't enough of it for me. So yeah, it just the thrills felt manufactured. They relied heavily on like sound effects for jump scares, and they often missed the mark for me. And the final chase scene was probably the most tense scene, and I'm definitely probably not alone on that opinion. Like I think that was the scene that was like it as far as the tense scenes go, and it showed that there was probably potential had there been more of this. Um, the title says the man in the white van, but yet we end up focusing solely on this female young character. And I know there's like this whole theme about parents should listen to their kids more, but like, yeah, I don't know. It just wasn't for me. Ultimately, it just wasn't for me. The lack of story around the man and the focus on, to me, not like the victim character. Like you don't see movies about the other characters, the survivors, because that's just not as interesting as seeing the story focusing on the the killer or the yeah, you get what I'm saying. Ultimately, it wasn't the focus of what I wanted to see. I will say on a positive note, the visuals were great. It really caught or captured that like 70s aesthetic. I liked that aspect of it. Like I said, there was definitely some potential here. I just think the film went in the wrong direction with the storyline. Um, if it was intended to be more true crime, you just have to like focus on the true crime and not the family of the survivor. It's like that's not really what true crime people want to see. They want to see the crime. They want to see, unfortunately, they want to see like the victims and how that night played out for the victims. They want to see, the dynamics and the psychology around the killer. They want to see all the stuff that plays into it. They don't want to see like the family dinner before the night that they go to a Halloween party and she's chased but survives, right? Like that's not what people want to see. So that is my opinion. And I am so open to hearing alternative opinion. So if you've seen The Man in the White Van and you have a different view of this film, please let me know. I would love to hear it. But if you haven't watched it and you plan to, that's kind of my take on it. So that's what I will share with you. But regardless, as always, I always say the same thing. Check it out for yourself. See it for yourself and let me know. All right. So that's Dirty Boy, The Man in the White Van. 2 quick reviews. Thank you so much for tuning in. Share your comments and thoughts about these films if you've seen them. And also make sure you like and subscribe and check out our other episodes. Thanks so much. And I will see you later. Have a good one.